On Tuesdays, I worked late in the attic. The world narrowed to brass screws, loop glass, and the soft hiss of rain combing the roof. I kept the same curve in my posture, the same hour on the clock when I'd stop to breathe and listen for the distant train. At 2:17 a.m., the second hand on the regulator made its quiet jump, and the gutters answered with their usual tin lullaby. That was routine. What wasn't routine was the drip that followed. Too sharp, too metallic, and coming from somewhere inside the house. It wasn't a gutter drip. It had a ping, the sound a small coin makes when dropped on a tray. One beat, and another, precise as a metronome set by an unkind hand. The first wrong detail found me before I moved. I held my breath, and the attic took a breath of its own, the rain dimming and swelling like a sleeper turning under heavy blankets. I set my tweezers down so carefully the felt pad didn't even sigh. A smear of watch oil on my thumb pulled a tiny string of scent. Metallic. Lemon, the life I'd chosen. The drip answered with a patient ping. It came from below and to the left. The guest room? I always kept that door closed. Habit. The guest room closet was where I stored the overflow, the framed photographs, the winter duvet sealed in a bag no one opened. I'd closed it before midnight. I remembered the feel of the latch. As I crossed the attic floor, I noticed the regulator's pendulum kiss the case at every swing. A whisper click, a sound that shouldn't be new but was. I passed the router. Its red LED blinked an even cadence. The phone on my bench showed 2:17, as if time had paused its face. The stair rail was cold and dry under my palm, but the air on the second step carried a damp breath. Not the clean scent of rain. Damp earth. Soil turned under a spade. Impossible in a sealed house unless something open had been opened. The drip paused, as if listening to me listen, then resumed. Ping, like a point of a small hammer tapped a bell. The landing light clicked and flickered. The bulb made a thin white, then a tired yellow. I didn't trust it. I took my phone and slid the flashlight on low, half light to keep edges soft. The guest room door wasn't closed. It wasn't open either. It sat at a quiet slant, like someone had left mid-decision. I noticed these things. My trade is noticing. There were other tells. The oval rug outside the guest room lay with its fringe combed toward the hall, not toward the room. The skirting board under the radiator had a pale gap I'd never seen. A line a coin could disappear into. And at my feet, near the threshold, a grain of brass caught the light. Just one, curled like a shaving from a lock cylinder. I touched it with the tip of a fingernail. It left a faint golden smear. The drip came again, softer now. Ping. It came from the guest room, but it bounced like it rode the wall cavities. I breathed in. The damp earth smell grew roots in the back of my nose, heavy and old. My brain offered the absurd. A potted plant tipped over. A window forced. A forgotten glass sweating onto wood. I nudged the door with my knuckle. It moved without sound. The room was as it always was because I kept it that way. The bed dressed. The two prints of long-ago beaches, a horizon line I'd measured once with a level. The window locked. The blackout curtain drawn. My grandmother's photograph on the nightstand. The bulb in the ceiling didn't give me even a protest. The phone's beam traveled across surfaces like a cautious hand. My eyes took inventory while my hand held the light. No footprints on the floorboards that my eye could see. No spray on the glass. And yet the smell deepened. Loam and old metal. The ping had become a tick further away, as if it had moved behind something. checked the window first. Latch intact. Beads of condensation along the lower sash, but no runnels, no prints. I drew the curtain back 2 inches. The rain was honest out there, banding the street lamp into ropes. On the inside of the glass, a pale oval, fogged, as if a face had leaned in from my side to watch the night. I lifted the phone and the oval thinned and vanished. My own breath, I told myself, though I'd exhaled away from the pain. I turned the beam to the nightstand. The photograph of my grandparents lived there, the one with my grandfather's hat brim, cutting a shadow like a dial. The frame faced the room last I remembered. Now it stared down the hall. It could have been me, careless earlier. It could have been. The ring on the wood under the frame, fresh, a perfect circle of faint moisture, said otherwise. Nothing had been set there recently. I didn't keep water in this room. The ring's center was dry. The circle itself was a trace, as if a cold rim had hovered and gone. The closet door sat flush. I pressed my ear to it. The wood told me nothing. But the drip ticked again, then stopped as my pulse climbed. I opened the closet and let the phone fill the small space. Boxes, sealed. Coats, shouldered. On the floor, a single pine needle lay like a compass point, green bronze and new. I don't own a pine. I backed out and checked the door frame. The strike plate screws were straight and tight, but the enamel on the frame bore a new arc of scratches at the height of the chain lock. I kept the chain engaged from the hall side. The scratch marks curved the same curve, a repeated practiced motion made by someone who wasn't guessing. A scuff mark hung like a shadow under the bed's far corner. I crouched. The air was colder down there, and it tasted like old coins. The phone's beam refused to penetrate all the way. The dust caught light like tiny planets. There was nothing, and then the dust moved in a shallow breath, as if a draft had learned a slow rhythm. I held my breath, and the room held its. We waited together. When the sound came, it wasn't a drip. It was a fingernail lightly scoring paint, a sound like moth wings on a lampshade. It came from the wall behind the headboard, traveled through wood, and ended at the baseboard gap under the radiator. It stopped at the same point. My phone found the gap again. I slid the light along it. Something had been eased out there. A panel, maybe. A design decision I'd never questioned because the house kindly kept old secrets. I should have gone for the phone app that called for help. I should have woken a neighbor. Instead, I crouched lower, because I am that kind of fool. I angled the light and saw what I'd missed at first. Fibers, not spider silk. Short black fibers, synthetic, clinging to the edge of the baseboard, glove lint shaved by wood. I pinched one. It snapped with a dry, quiet sound. The bed creaked a fraction of a millimeter as the old frame accepted my shift of weight. The room accepted me being in it. The rain had become a roar, a stage whisper over everything. From the hall, the router's LED kept time. 2 beats red, a pause, 2 beats red. My phone buzzed as a system notification wanted to tell me something, then thought better of it. The screen flickered. For a second, the time read 2:17 again. I straightened and took 1 step backward. Something moved across the mirror on the dresser. Not a person. Not a shadow of a branch. It was as if the glass itself had remembered someone and let that memory walk by. A shape, a shoulder, a head turning toward the hall. The phone beam jumped as my wrist did. The glass showed only me, smaller than I felt. I closed the guest room door. Routine returned like a blanket I dragged behind me down the hall. I pressed the chain lock into its cradle and felt the new scratches under my fingertip. My breath had a tremor to it I didn't like. I told myself to fix the bulb in the morning, to seal the baseboard, to brush the fiber into a bag and label it like the careful person I pretend not to be. On the landing, I paused. The drip had stopped entirely. The house had gone very still. The attic stairs accepted my weight again. From below, from the kitchen, a tiny sound made a decision for me, a soft, metallic clink. Not loud. The kind of sound a deadbolt makes when someone tests it gently from the outside. Once, then twice. A patient rhythm in the rain. We'll breathe slow here, in through the nose and out through the mouth. The storm can hold our questions. When you're ready, we'll go and see who knows my locks so well. Downstairs had its own bedtime routine. I always crossed the kitchen in the same 5 steps, palming the counter lip as I passed, touching the cool rim of the sink, glancing once at the back door to see the deadbolt's brass eye sitting horizontal. Locked. The storm made the window over the sink bloom with soft, breathy fog. I wiped it with the back of my wrist, like I always did, out of habit more than need. These small rituals anchor you. I've always believed in anchors. The wrong note in the music was waiting. That soft metallic clink came again from the door. Not a rattle, not wind. A tool touching a lock with patience. Clink, pause, clink. Whoever was out there wasn't in a hurry, which chilled me more than a hard shove would have. I set the phone on the counter, face up, flashlight dimmed to a low cone to keep reflections from betraying my position. My fingers found the small brass hammer I keep in the drawer with the twine and batteries. It looked like a toy against the door, but the weight was honest in my hand. I moved to the side of the door where the sight line through the small window wouldn't silhouette me. The rubber mat below gave a whisper that only someone who knows their house hears. The smell by the door was rain and old coins, but underneath something earthier, damp wool, old leather, and that same metallic tang I'd tasted in the guest room. My intruder carried their own atmosphere, a signature of rust and time. I crouched, bringing my eyes level with the lower panel. Fine grit lined the baseboard where it meets tile. The storm could have pushed it under, but the grit had a pattern to it, a thin crescent. The same curve repeated like something cylindrical had been set and lifted in the same place, more than once. Under the bottom gap, something fine shivered. Not a draft. Fibers. Short black. Synthetic fibers. The kind that shave off from gloves and cling where wood and paint don't want them. The deadbolt faceplate caught my phone's light just enough to show me fresh arcs of scratches, half moons around the keyway that hadn't been there last week. The wear was bright, not yet dulled by air. Someone had been here before tonight, someone practicing. Each probe I heard now was economical, surgical, no wasted motion, no frustration when a pin refused to set. This person had opened 1,000 locks, maybe more. Clink. Against my better judgment, I tilted my head to the small window and looked not through it, but at it, letting the glass reflect the light from the stove's clock and the router's cadenced red. Through the frosted glass, I could make out a tall, narrow shape, patient as a heron. They'd heard me move. For 30 seconds, we played statue, predator, and prey, each waiting for the other to move first. The deadbolt clicked. Not the harsh snap of forced entry, but the soft whisper of a lock that had been convinced to cooperate. The door didn't open. Instead, I heard the chain lock engage, not from my side, but from theirs. Someone had reached through the gap and set my own security against me. The brass shaving I'd found upstairs suddenly made terrible sense. They'd been practicing. Through the glass, the shape moved with liquid grace, arranging something on my back step. I heard the soft clink of metal on concrete, objects being placed with ceremonial precision. 7 of them, each placement deliberate as a chess move. Through the door's textured glass, I could make out rectangular shapes that caught the faint light and threw it back in brass gleams. Antique locks, arranged in a careful semicircle. From the counter, my phone buzzed once. The screen showed the time. 2:17 a.m. It had been, 15 minutes since I'd heard that in the attic? Time shouldn't repeat. Yet the microwave chose that moment to blink and reset. All zeros, a blink, then 2:17 appeared in pale green like a memory. The router's red light blinked its 2-beat pattern, then changed to long pauses between single blinks. Communication, if anyone were talking that language. A paper edge kissed the tile by my shoe. An envelope sliding under the door, slow as a tongue. White, no postage. My name handwritten in small, careful capitals that weren't mine. Inside, a single instant photograph. My attic bench in its island of light. The regulator's dial centered in the frame. Second hand stopped at 2:17 exactly. And there I was. A sliver of shoulder and jaw reflected in the bench lamp. The angle included in soft focus, the baseboard gap in the guest room wall through the open door. 2 small dots of moisture freckled the white margin. I touched one and smelled it. Metallic, like the drip. A second envelope followed, thicker. Inside, a memory card in a cheap plastic adapter. On the label, in those same precise capitals, for you. The F had a tiny notch in the crossbar, the sort of imperfection you remember. The figure straightened outside and pressed something against the glass. My grandmother's photograph from the guest room nightstand. They held it there for 5 seconds, long enough for me to understand. I've been inside. I know your treasures. When they pulled it away, they left something else pressed to the glass. A key, brass, ornate, with a bow shaped like a bird in flight. Through the frosted pane, I saw them raise their hands to their hood. What emerged made my breath catch. Not a face, but smooth white porcelain with painted features. Rosy cheeks, red lips, curved in a gentle smile, and dark holes where eyes should be. A doll's face, beautiful and terrible in its emptiness. They tilted their head, studying me as if they could see me perfectly, then raised one gloved finger to the painted lips. Not yet. We're not ready yet. Hello? The voice was quiet and clear, not outside, but from the hall behind me. I turned slow, moving the phone's beam across the kitchen archway. The guest room door, which I'd closed, was at that same quiet slant. At the top of the stairs, a thread of darkness shifted like a shadow unhooking itself. I kept my voice level. You should go. Silence. The house breathed. The microwave's 2:17 started blinking. The router's pattern had changed again. Behind me, something slid. That distinct metallic slide of chain links coming off a hook. The chain lock from the guest room. A soft foot rolled weight from heel to toe on floorboard B, the one that complains under strangers alone. I backed to the door, put my left hand on the deadbolt, and felt cold air at the keyway. The thumb turn moved too easy. Someone had lubricated the cylinder. A smell of graphite lifted from it like dust off a book. The stove's hood light winked on full bright, then dimmed to nightlight level. That was not something my house does by itself. On the window glass above the sink, a faint figure swam into being as if breathed from inside. Not a face, A smile, the curve of it drawn by a finger. It looked wrong because the curve went the wrong way first, then corrected. Same curve, repeated until it learned to look like ours. Outside, the porcelain mask caught the light one final time before dissolving into shadow. The 7 locks clinked softly as the figure withdrew, measured and unhurried. At the edge of my yard, they paused and turned back. Even through the storm, I felt their attention like a weight. The key remained pressed to my door like a brass flower. And upstairs, something moved across the attic floor with the patience of someone who had all night to wait. We'll breathe slow here. Let the rain hold our questions. When you're ready, we'll take that memory card upstairs and see what they've been seeing. If the chain holds. If the smile stays just a shape on glass. I made tea the same way I always did after a scare. Kettle on low so it wouldn't scream. Mug warmed with a swirl of hot tap water. 2 minutes on the old timer, because waiting calms your hands and gives the mind space to sort truth from imagination. The rain gave the windows its steady hush, and the house seemed to agree to behave, at least on the surface. Then my timer stayed at 1 second instead of finishing, its red display frozen like a held breath. The electric kettle's light dimmed, lifted, dimmed, breathing with a rhythm that wasn't mine. A faint, high-pitched whine rolled through the kitchen outlets. The mosquito note of something newly powered drawing current from lines that had been quiet for years. My phone buzzed against the counter. System anomaly detected, multiple devices. The notification showed 3 new connections to my home network, devices with generic names like Cam01 and Relay Node. I'd never seen them before, yet the timestamp showed they'd been connected for weeks. The microwave blinked 2:17 again, then 2:17, then held steady as if that moment had become the only time that mattered. The router's red LED had changed its pattern completely. 2 quick pulses, 1 long, pause, repeat. A digital heartbeat that felt too deliberate to be random. I checked the back door without approaching the glass. The 7 antique locks still sat on the step in their neat arc, dark with rain. But the brass key that had been pressed to the window was gone. Vanished without sound, without explanation. The memory card felt cold between my fingers as I climbed to the attic. Each step announced my position, but silence felt more dangerous than sound. The house had changed its breathing. Deeper inhales, longer pauses, as if learning to accommodate a second set of lungs. At the top of the stairs, that faint scent of graphite lingered like metallic dust, the signature of locks that had been serviced by patient hands. My workbench sat in its pool of lamplight, everything precisely where I'd left it, except for one detail. Fine gray powder dusted the felt pad beneath my brass mallet. Graphite. The same scent I'd detected at the back door. Someone had been here at my sacred workspace, preparing their tools with the casual intimacy of a colleague. The violation felt deeper than mere trespass. This was desecration of ritual, of the careful order that kept my world stable. I slipped on cotton gloves and inserted the memory card. It mounted immediately, naming itself Vessel, before I could assign it anything else. The root directory held folders labeled with surgical precision: surveillance, patterns, architect, and a single text file called Look. I opened it first. 2 lines in those careful block capitals. Begin where you always begin. End where you refuse. The F in refuse carried that same notch in the crossbar I'd seen on the envelope. Not a flourish, but a signature flaw, a tell that connected every piece of evidence. The surveillance folder contained hundreds of video files spanning months. Each file name followed the same format: location, date, timestamp. Always 217. I clicked one, labeled Attic Workshop as 2025 10 1902 Fight Dempelfauer. Tonight, 2 minutes before the first drip. The footage showed me hunched over my workbench, absorbed in delicate clockwork. The camera angle was impossible. High and behind me where nothing existed but empty air and wooden beams. I looked up at the ceiling, scanning every inch. The smoke detector sat in its familiar corner, red LED winking. I fetched my screwdriver and stepped onto the stool. The detector's faceplate turned with a tiny squeal of protest. Inside, where a sensor should have lived, sat a black square no larger than my thumbnail. A micro camera with a wire thin as thread disappearing into the ceiling void, following paths old knob and tube wiring would have taken decades ago. The laptop chimed softly. A new window had opened without my input. Access log. Entries scrolled past. 0217 beer 0217 or 0217 or stretching back months, each tagged with room names I recognized and some I didn't. The final entry read now, then corrected itself to 0217. Yeah, and it's even though my watch showed nearly 3. Time had been redefined according to someone else's schedule. I checked the patterns folder. Architectural drawings filled the screen. Blueprints of my house showing hidden conduits, reinforced walls, and interconnected passages I'd never known existed. At the bottom right corner, a signature, a stylized W with its middle spike shortened. The same architectural limp I'd glimpsed on old plans behind Murphy's hardware counter. The paranoid architect from the 1950s renovation. His Plan W had been more than structural paranoia. It was infrastructure for something larger. A soft drip landed on the laptop's trackpad. Dark water with a metallic sheen, carrying tiny glittering flakes that caught the light like powdered metal. I looked up. The window sash appeared tight, but moisture beaded along the frame's interior edge. Not rain forcing its way in, something condensing from within the walls themselves as if the house were sweating old secrets. The laptop screen flickered. A new video file opened automatically. Live feed from the camera I'd just discovered. I watched myself watching the screen, an infinite regression of surveillance. But in the reflection on the monitor, something moved behind my shoulder. Not quite a shadow, not quite a person, a shape that belonged to the space between certainty and fear. Systems began failing in polite, incremental ways. The regulator's pendulum hiccuped and resumed, catching itself mid-swing like a dancer stumbling. The attic light dimmed 10%, then a little more, shy of alarming but insistent in its message. My phone displayed no service for a heartbeat before remembering its purpose. The kettle downstairs clicked on without water, then off again, embarrassed by its eagerness. Under the workbench, my fingers found something that shouldn't exist. A second memory card taped along the apron's underside, flush and nearly invisible. The tape held a single black fiber, synthetic, the same material I'd found by the guest room radiator. This card contained coordinates that translated to my address, down to the foundation's exact center. Below that, 1954, Plan W, Phase 1 complete. From somewhere deep in the house's bones came a sound I'd been dreading, the soft, definitive click of a lock turning. Not the back door this time. Something deeper, more central. A lock that had been waiting decades for the right key, the right moment, the right confluence of preparation and opportunity. The laptop screen went dark for an instant, then displayed a single line of text. Welcome to Phase 2. We'll breathe easy here. Let the rain wash over our questions. When you're ready, we'll follow that patient click to wherever the architect's true design wants to lead us next. The house remembers everything, and now it's ready to teach. The house wanted me to find the kitchen changed, so it changed while I was upstairs, sorting truth from digital phantoms. When I descended the final 8 steps, counting them as always, my palm finding the familiar carved notch in the banister, the kitchen lights welcomed me with a warm 60% glow I hadn't set. Not harsh, considerate. The kind of illumination a thoughtful host provides when they know you prefer certain atmospheres for certain kinds of work. On the island where I keep nothing because empty surfaces calm the mind, 7 keys waited in a perfect semicircle, brass and iron, each bow facing inward like courtiers attending a central authority. Their arrangement wasn't casual. These were objects placed with the same precision I used when setting watch components, each positioned according to a logic that respected both function and ceremony. In the center, on a square of black felt that absorbed light like velvet water, sat a pocket watch I'd never owned. The watch troubled me because it promised nothing that watches should promise. No numerals marked its obsidian face, no minute divisions, only a deep black surface that swallowed the kitchen's gentle light and returned faint red reflections from the router and microwave, like distant stars. A single hand, thick at the base and needle-fine at the tip, rotated counterclockwise at half the speed time should move. This was a timepiece designed for going backward before going forward, and my throat wanted to swallow around a fear I couldn't name. I approached the island as I would approach any delicate mechanism, with respect for its complexity and wariness of its intentions. The keys bore the honest scars of craftsmanship, machining marks beneath their patina, cross-hatched micro-scratches that no romantic forger could replicate. Each bow's inner curve showed fresh rub marks at 2 precise points, where a chain or ring had recently rested, then been removed with care. Under each key, graphite powder dusted the felt in perfect crescents, the pale glitter of filings that fall when a key is dressed against a file to achieve exact tolerances. The sweet, medicinal smell I'd detected upstairs had followed me down, threading through the kitchen like an unwelcome guest making itself comfortable. Ozone and graphite, with something antiseptic underneath. The scent of old medical equipment or laboratories where precise work happened in sterile conditions. It came from the keys themselves, or perhaps from whatever mechanism they were designed to serve. I lifted one with a cotton cloth, careful not to disturb the arrangement. The metal was warm, recently handled, recently loved. Under the loop I keep in my shirt pocket, the bow revealed itself as a masterwork of miniature sculpture. A bird in flight, its wings spread in a moment of perfect suspension. The shank bore teeth cut in improbable depths, suggesting a lock mechanism far more complex than any domestic hardware. This wasn't a key for opening doors. This was a key for opening possibilities. The back door called for my attention with the soft authority of changed details. The deadbolt's thumb turn wore a smear of dark graphite, and when I touched it, the metal moved with suspicious ease. Someone had taught this lock to love cooperation. The chain lock's strike plate bore that familiar arc of fresh scratches, the same curve practiced until it became muscle memory. No pry marks, no bent metal. A professional's courtesy toward hardware that would need to function many times. Against the toaster, an envelope waited with the patience of a formal invitation. White paper, wax seal impressed with a simple circle. Inside, another instant photograph. My kitchen island, empty, time-stamped 02.17. In the photo's upper right corner, reflected in inert, the microwave's glass door. A ghost of porcelain smiled from the margin. Proof that they curated not just objects but moments. Not just spaces, but the memories those spaces would hold. The house began its own small rebellions against my investigation. The kettle clicked on without invitation, its blue indicator light winking like a knowing eye before the heating element hummed and stopped, embarrassed at its presumption. The router changed its blink pattern. 2 quick reds. Pause, 1 long red. Repeat. Somewhere behind the walls, a relay answered with an insectile tick. My domestic systems obeyed a conductor I couldn't see. The pantry had been waiting for this moment, I realized as I opened its door and found the ordinary armor of my life. Shelves, jars, flour, arranged around a secret it could no longer keep. On the back wall, at knee height, a rectangle of paint sat a shade off from the rest. Not a different color, but a different age, its edges showing hairline cracks, in the tension pattern that develops when wood moves and paint resists. At the lower left corner, a hole bored clean through, diameter no larger than a pencil lead. Another at the top right, a diagonal pair designed for access, not structure. I ran my fingernail along the panel seam and felt powder-fine grit. Graphite. They'd taught this mechanism to love ease the same way they'd taught my locks. Using the butt of a butter knife, I pressed the lower hole gently. The panel sighed forward into my hand on concealed hinges, revealing dark space that breathed with the scent of damp stone and cold metal. My phone's beam traveled along a horizontal run of repurposed sheet metal duct, not for air, but for infrastructure. Twisted pair cable, ancient cloth-insulated wiring, modern Cat6 patched to both with careful solder and heat shrink. A time splice connecting decades of intention. Taped beside it, a narrow rail with notches worn bright by repeated use. Same curve. I listened and heard what I'd been following all night. That slow, deliberate tick of a relay shifting state at 2:17 and holding each interval long enough to make the next inevitable. Within finger reach, a thin tray tucked just proud of the framing. I teased it forward to reveal objects that belonged to a certain kind of person. Lock picks worn bright where fingers had lived. A rake and hook and diamond. A tension wrench. A tubular pick for vending locks. A small black flashlight with red filter. A key gauge. And a folded cloth bearing the same graphite crescent dust that lived under the keys on the island. They'd left me a kit like a teacher setting out tools for a first lesson. The tray's second compartment, shallow and felt-lined, held 3 instant photographs that made my blood slow to syrup. My front door, my bedroom door, and my throat closed, my mouth while I slept, lips parted in breath I didn't know I took, the corner of that porcelain mask reflected in the window behind my bed. Proof, not just of access, but of watchfulness, intimate enough to be cruel. I withdrew from the pantry, and the house reacted to my refusal like a chess opponent seeing its gambit ignored. The lights dimmed another careful notch. The microwave chirped and displayed 2:17. Then the digits rolled backward in a blur to 2:16, then forward again, as if time itself were learning new rhythms. The radio under the cabinet, which I never use, whispered to life with soft static and a sibilant voice I couldn't separate from the rain. Same hour, same curve. Above the sink, the fogged window cleared in a perfect circle, as if a mouth had breathed hot against it from outside. A smile drew itself into the moisture with exaggerated care, correcting itself once when the arc went wrong, then retracing the right curve until the line deepened into certainty. Gloves leave no prints on glass, but the pressure pattern, faint radial striations from a fingertip pad, remained for a heartbeat before melting back into condensation. The backdoor hardware moved with the deliberate vocabulary of controlled access. The deadbolt retracted a hair and seated again. A test. The chain lifted one link, slid, then settled back into its staple. Whoever held it possessed control but chose restraint. A lesson about distance, about the difference between capability and intention. Through the frosted pane, the porcelain smile swam into focus inches beyond the glass, tilted with fondness, then receded into rain and shadow. My security pad chimed as if someone had input a code from the other side of the wall. Beep, beep, beep. The display lit in soft green. Armed stay. I hadn't armed it. My own system had become a trellis for someone else's vine. When I pressed cancel, it ignored me for a heartbeat before acknowledging with a reluctant chirp, authority failing in polite increments. I tried calling Murphy from the hardware store, the one who'd shown me the old blueprints and told stories about Plan W and the reclusive architect who didn't trust straight lines. His line clicked and rang once, then played a recording of Murphy's voice with the edges sanded off. "Leave it. I'm sleeping." Not his cadence. The sound bed under the words held rain from another night, another storm. When I spoke, the line filled with faraway river sound, before ending itself. The pocket watch's hand completed a slow, counterclockwise lap and hesitated at the top, as if deciding whether to continue its backward march or attempt something new. My phone buzzed with a calendar alert I didn't set. Observation window opens. Beneath it, 02-10-17. My thumb hovered over dismiss, but the alert slid left by itself and filed under completed. Another small authority claimed by patient hands. From the pantry conduit, colder air breathed out, carrying metallic damp that stuck to the back of my tongue. Along the baseboard under the guest room radiator, through wood and plaster, through the house's old arteries, a new sound began. Eorm, soft, steady trickle. Liquid. Not the roof's honest leak, but something interior. A reveal you smell before you see. Ironstone, old water, coming forward after years asleep. I set the keys back exactly where they'd been and returned the pocket watch to its felt like a respectful archivist. The semicircle felt like the edge of a dial. The center felt like an eye. Standing in the doorway, I listened to the steady seep building beneath the walls, the chain settling once more with a tender clink, the radio whispering phrases I could almost catch. The house held still as a breathing animal waiting for my decision. We'll breathe slow here. Let the storm soften the edges of what we've learned. When you're ready, we'll follow that liquid sound to where it decides to pool and discover what the 7 keys want to unlock. If the hand turns again, if the smile stays on its side of the glass. At that hour, when the house settles into its deepest quiet, I did what I always did after disturbance. I moved through small anchoring rituals. I wiped the counter in 3 slow circles, aligned the tea tins so their labels formed a tidy line, checked that the kettle sat square on its base. These small ceremonies calm a restless house. They calm the person performing them too. The wrong detail arrived with the patience of water finding its level. That metallic trickle I'd been following had found its voice, a steady seep emerging from the baseboard gap beneath the guest room radiator. But the sound traveled through the kitchen's bones. I followed it with my ear pressed to the wall, tracking the liquid's path through hidden conduits until it pooled beneath the pantry's toe kick in a perfect circle, dark and viscous, catching the under-cabinet light with an oily rainbow sheen. I knelt and touched the edge with a cotton swab. The liquid clung with unusual surface tension, stretching into threads before breaking. Under my phone's light, tiny metallic flakes swirled in the darkness like microscopic galaxies. Not random debris, but uniform particles that caught and threw back light with the specific gleam of worked metal. I dabbed again and tasted the air. Old iron, wet stone, and something else that made my watchmaker's brain whisper about alloys and oxidation. Nickel silver. German silver. The pale metal used in precision lock bodies that wear in particular ways when keys learn their cylinders. The house began its own small conversations. The router's LED changed rhythm. 2 quick reds, pause, 1 long red, repeat. From behind the walls, a relay answered with an insectile tick. The radio under the cabinet breathed static that almost formed words. Same hour, it might have said, or perhaps just the storm pressing its lips to the antenna. My domestic systems were learning a new conductor's signals. I killed the kitchen lights and stood in honest darkness, letting rain and appliance hum be the only sounds. Then I performed the simple test any technician does when they suspect hidden observation. I raised my phone and switched to the front-facing camera. Infrared diodes betray themselves to digital sensors. On the black screen, small constellations glowed like patient eyes, one above the stove, tucked into the vent hood, another in the smoke detector's housing, 2 more at ankle height where cabinet corners meet toe kick, pinhole lenses positioned to catch foot traffic patterns. A 5th floated above the arch to the hall, a point of dull red that human eyes would never notice in daylight. Proof of surveillance presented itself without my asking. I turned slowly, counting those digital stars, and felt pressure between my shoulder blades that wasn't physical. From the pantry conduit, a thin red line blinked 3 times and held steady. An unseen device, finding network connection and congratulating itself. My phone buzzed with a notification from no app I owned. Access granted in those small, neat block capitals with the accidentally notched F. The toe kick panel lifted with the gentleness of practiced hands. Behind the decorative board, a narrow gutter ran along the baseboard. New metal fastened to old wood with tiny, evenly spaced screws. Each screw's slot aligned with the grain. No hurried installation. The channel shone with a film of that same gray liquid, being delivered rather than leaking, following a path my house had been taught to provide. I slid my hand into the pantry conduit and felt for the seam I'd found earlier. The hidden panel eased out on concealed hinges, revealing a compact cavity that shouldn't exist. A narrow desk, built between studs, painted to match the pantry wall. A monitor no bigger than a paperback slept there with its face to the wood. Beside it, components I recognized by silhouette. A network video recorder, cellular modem with stub antenna, UPS battery pack humming at the frequency you learn to stop hearing. The monitor woke to my knuckles' pressure. Light pooled in the cavity and showed me to myself. Kitchen camera, living room camera, stair landing, attic desk. A quad of live feeds, all time-stamped 2:17 regardless of the actual hour. In the upper left corner of the largest feed, a word appeared momentarily in red. Access. Not notification, not interface. Annotation. Someone was watching me watch myself. On the stairs camera, a smear came and went as if someone had brushed close to the lens. The attic feed showed faint movement at the frame's edge. Something passing between the regulator and workbench lamp. Not fast, not bold, but deliberate as a memory deciding to stretch. From the living room camera, thermal imaging engaged like a magic trick performed by algorithm. The image flattened to whites and blacks and temperature grays. My body glowed warm against the cooler room, and from that frame's edge, a second heat signature entered. Tall, narrow, cooler than me, but warmer than the house. The figure raised a device I recognized by profile. A thermal imager, looking at the camera that watched it. Lens, observing lens. Two watchers catching each other in the act and finding it satisfactory. The porcelain mask reflected like a cold star, showing nothing of its own temperature. A ghost on a ghost image. They moved their hand in small, methodical sweeps, measuring the bones of my house the way a hunter learns the bones of a path. "Hello, Julian." The voice came not from the radio but spatial, unmoored, transmitted through wood and wire to vibrate the pantry panel like a speaker cone. My given name sounded like a coin placed carefully on glass. Bright, deliberate, meant for my attention alone. "The observation window is complete. We're ready for the next phase." I didn't answer. My house answered for me. The security pad in the hall engaged with 3 dutiful beeps. Armed stay glowed green. The front door's deadbolt turned under an absent hand and seated. My own defenses rehearsed for an audience I couldn't see, but could feel watching through every hidden lens. On the monitor's desk shelf, a stack of printed cards sat held by a bulldog clip. I slid one free. Heavy stock, matte, embossed with the circle I'd thought decorative. Up close, the circle resolved into a plan view. The architect's Plan W reduced to a seal. Around it, block text. Observation window complete. Underneath, descent protocol initiated. 7 tiny tick marks divided the circle into equal arcs. 7 keys, 7 phases, 7 locks for whatever the architect had embedded in my foundation. The liquid's trickle grew bolder, the circular pool beneath the toe kick swelling by careful increments. An engineer somewhere was opening valves, watching for tolerance, measuring flow. The gray medium carried its cargo of metallic filings, memories of keys teaching cylinders, locks learning to love specific pressures and angles. Someone was washing decades of practice through my house's hidden arteries. From deeper than the kitchen, below the old linoleum we'd tiled over, beneath joists that once supported spaces the architect had reimagined, came a sound I'd been dreading. The slow, satisfied quarter turn of a cylinder that hadn't felt a key in decades. A lock engaged where no lock existed in my blueprint of the house. Dust drifted down from the heat register in a fine glittering veil, settling on the island's black felt around the obsidian pocket watch, like snow around a monument. The thermal figure on the monitor stepped backward through the living room and off-screen. Seconds later, the kitchen window fogged in a pale oval, then cleared at the center as if someone had rested their forehead against the pane and stepped back. The smile drew itself again. Wrong the first time, then corrected, learning the right curve. The hesitation in the line matched the notch in every F I'd seen tonight. Same hand, same patient practice. My phone displayed a new alert I hadn't set. Foundation access confirmed. Descent window 02 Chinois 17 02 17. The countdown had begun, measuring time in the architect's preferred direction, backward toward a moment that had been waiting decades to arrive. The pocket watch downstairs completed another counterclockwise revolution, its single hand building toward a destination with the patience of geological time. Systems began choosing sides with polite efficiency. My phone toggled to airplane mode without animation. The thermostat clicked and adjusted itself down 2 degrees. The kettle's light came on, apologized, and went off. The house was a considerate host, coaxing a skittish guest deeper into the room, using my own infrastructure to shepherd me toward whatever the architect's plan W had always intended. The liquid beneath the toe kick found its drain and began flowing with purpose, disappearing into the wall's hidden channels to feed whatever mechanism had just awakened below. The metallic scent sharpened, carrying notes of deep places, limestone clay, the mineral breath of spaces where sunlight had never touched. From the foundation's bones, a low vibration began. Not the house settling, but something massive stirring to life after decades of patient sleep. I returned the monitor to its cavity and the panel to its seamless position, wiping my prints even though I'd worn gloves. The house held its breath as I straightened, waiting for my decision. Through the floor, that newly engaged lock clicked once more. A hardware turn that spoke of heavy mechanisms and serious purpose. Whatever door had just remembered how to open was waiting for me to provide the key. We'll breathe slow here while the rain prints its gentle signature against the glass. When you're ready, we'll follow that patient click down to where the architect's true foundation waits, and discover what kind of door opens only from the inside. If the lights stay this considerate, if the descent proves as gentle as the observation. The basement had been calling to me since the foundation access alert, but I approached it the way I approach any delicate mechanism, with patience, proper tools, and the kind of methodical attention that keeps fingers attached to hands. I gathered my brass mallet, the cotton gloves, my phone with its failing battery, and the small notebook where I record observations that matter. The house hummed around me with new electrical signatures, systems awakening after decades of patient sleep. The basement light was already on when I reached the top of the stairs, casting that familiar 60% glow I'd been seeing all night. The switch at the top sat in the off position, yet the bulb below maintained its warm, compliant illumination. Someone had taught my electrical system new tricks, bypassing my authority with the same surgical precision they'd applied to my locks. The brass toggle switch bore a fresh smear of graphite powder, that same metallic signature following me through every violation. I descended the 13 wooden steps, counting them, reflexively, my palm finding the carved nick in the handrail that had guided my hand for years. On the 7th step, a draft rose that carried the mineral scent of deep places, limestone, clay, and that persistent metallic tang of worked brass and old keys. The air tasted different, thinner, charged with the ozone signature of electrical systems drawing power from circuits that shouldn't exist. At the bottom, I paused to catalog the basement's new vocabulary. The familiar hum of the furnace had been joined by a subsonic thrumming. Not 60-cycle house current, but something slower, more deliberate. A 2-beat rhythm that matched the router's changed pattern upstairs. My circuit panel drew my attention because its door hung slightly ajar, revealing breakers I'd never installed. 20-amp doubles in positions that should have been empty, each labeled in those familiar block capitals: conduit, drainage, access, descent. The main breaker showed 240 volts flowing to circuits that weren't supposed to exist, feeding loads I couldn't identify. Someone had been teaching my electrical system to serve two masters. Beside the panel, a small module had been mounted. Clean machining, professional installation, labeled flood sensor in that neat handwriting with the notched F. Its LED ticked once, paused, then settled into the same two-beat pattern governing the house's new rhythm. Behind the water heater, where I'd never thought to look because water heaters demand space and attention, the concrete floor bore a hairline crack, too straight to be natural. I traced it with my fingernail and felt graphite powder, the same metallic dust that had been following me all night. The crack formed three sides of a perfect rectangle, precise as a door frame, with the fourth side hidden beneath the water heater's base. The unit lifted with surprising ease, not bolted down as it should have been, but resting in position like a stage prop. Underneath, the missing fourth side revealed itself as a threshold, worn smooth by decades of patient feet. Beyond it, a narrow staircase descended into darkness, each step carved from the same limestone that formed the house's original foundation. The walls were dressed stone, fitted without mortar in the old style, each block bearing the subtle tool marks of handwork from another era. At the top step, a brass plate set flush with the stone bore an inscription that made my breath catch. Plan W, Phase 7, Authorized Personnel Only, 1954. The date connected to Murphy's stories about the reclusive architect who disappeared before the renovation was finished, leaving behind blueprints no one could fully decode, and modifications no inspector could fully catalog. I descended 12 limestone steps, my phone's beam revealing walls that grew more elaborate with each level. The dressed stone gave way to carved reliefs, geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow in the moving light, creating optical illusions of depth and motion. The air grew thicker, carrying scents that belonged to different centuries: old wood, worked metal, and something organic that might have been leather or might have been something I didn't want to identify. The passage opened into a chamber larger than my kitchen, its walls fitted with 7 alcoves arranged in a perfect circle. Each alcove contained a different lock mechanism: lever locks, ward locks, pin tumbler locks of unusual complexity. Not modern hardware, but antique mechanisms that gleamed like jewelry in my phone's beam. Each lock showed signs of recent maintenance: graphite powder in the cylinders, oil on the moving parts, the subtle shine that comes from patient hands performing familiar work. At the chamber's center, a raised platform bore 7 shallow depressions, arranged in the same pattern I'd found on my kitchen island. The 7 keys upstairs weren't random antiques. They were components of a larger mechanism, pieces of a puzzle that had been waiting 70 years for someone to solve it. Between the alcoves, brass pipes emerged from the walls, each capped with a valve wheel bearing the architect's stylized W. The pipes connected to a central manifold that fed into the platform's base, creating a hydraulic system of surprising sophistication. From the walls themselves, a voice emerged. Not from speakers, but conducted through stone and metal like a throat built into the architecture. Julian. My name spoken with the same careful pronunciation I'd heard all night. The observation window is complete. Foundation access confirmed. Welcome to Plan W. My phone buzzed with a message from no sender. 7 keys, 7 locks, 7 choices, descent protocol active. The text disappeared as I read it, leaving only the timestamp that had become my night's refrain. Ado 2.17. Time had stopped moving forward and started moving in circles, each revolution bringing me closer to a decision I didn't understand but couldn't avoid. Behind the water heater, tucked into the space where the foundation met the floor, I found what I'd been unconsciously seeking: the architect's original blueprints. Not reproductions, but onion skin vellum rolled on a wooden dowel, brown at the edges with decades. I secured the corners with paint cans and let the architect's true vision unfold across my makeshift table. The drawing showed my house, but annotated with shadows I'd never thought to measure. Hidden conduits, reinforced walls, and interconnected passages that transform my familiar home into something far more complex. The basement was labeled Phase 7, with notation showing the chamber I now stood in, and below it, additional levels that descended into the earth like roots. At the bottom of the deepest level, a circle marked Keyway, type special, with a bow shaped like a bird in flight. The hydraulic system began to sing as valves opened in sequence somewhere in the walls. The platform vibrated with mechanical life, its carved surface warming under my palm as internal mechanisms engaged. Whatever this machine was designed to do, it was preparing to do it whether I participated or not. The 7 alcoves began to glow with soft internal light, each lock mechanism illuminated from within by sources I couldn't identify. From above, footsteps crossed the kitchen floor with the measured pace of someone who knew exactly where they were going. The chain at the back door climbed one link and settled. That familiar sound of controlled access, authority claimed but not yet enforced. My phone's battery finally surrendered, leaving me with only the alcove's glow and the growing certainty that the architect's Plan W had been waiting 70 years for this exact moment. The brass pipes sang with increasing water pressure as the manifold accepted flow from each line, mixing streams according to ratios calculated decades ago. The chamber held its breath as footsteps began descending the wooden stairs above, each step deliberate as a countdown. In the growing hydraulic symphony, I heard the voice again, conducted through stone and metal and patient time. The foundation remembers its purpose, Julian. 7 locks, 7 keys, 7 doors between what was and what will be. Choose carefully. Some doors close behind you. We'll breathe slow here, while brass and stone sing their mechanical prayers. When you're ready, we'll discover what the 7 locks want to teach us about the difference between opening and entering. If the light stays this gentle, if the architect's patience proves as eternal as his foundation. The footsteps reached the limestone threshold with the measured patience of someone who had walked this path many times before. I steadied myself with the small rituals that anchor a craftsman's mind. Count the alcoves again. 7. Trace the platform's carved edge with a gloved fingertip. Breathe in for 4, out for 6. The brass pipes sang their hydraulic hymn, while the chamber's stone walls exhaled the mineral breath of deep places. Everything here had been waiting, and now the waiting was almost over. The figure that emerged from the stairwell wore the same porcelain mask I'd seen pressed against my kitchen window, but now I could see the careful craftsmanship in its painted features. Rosy cheeks that caught the alcove's amber light, lips curved in that patient smile, and dark eye holes that seemed less empty than selectively blind. They moved with the fluid economy of someone who knew every surface, every shadow, every mechanical tolerance in this buried workshop. Julian, my name spoken with the familiarity of long acquaintance. The observation phase is complete. You've been an exemplary student. They set a leather portfolio on the platform's edge, its brass corners catching light, like small suns. 3 years above this foundation, learning its rhythms, teaching it yours. The house has been studying you as carefully as you study your timepieces. From the portfolio came photographs that made time fold backward on itself. My house, across decades, different paint, different seasons, but always that same curve of the front walk, always the same window where I worked late into the night. And there, in a frame that should have been impossible, my father on the porch steps, head bent over a pocket watch, his young hands already showing the careful precision that would one day become mine. Behind him, barely visible in the window's reflection, the suggestion of a porcelain face watching from inside. Generational surveillance, I said, my voice steadier than my pulse. Stewardship, they corrected gently. The architect designed this foundation for someone with specific gifts. Precision of hand, patience with complex mechanisms, the ability to read the language that brass and steel speak when they've been properly loved. They arranged the 7 keys from my kitchen island in their familiar semicircle. Your family carried those gifts. We've been waiting for them to mature. I examined the keys with a watchmaker's eye, noting details I'd missed upstairs. Each bow bore microscopic tool marks, not the random scratches of age, but deliberate modifications. The second key showed a burr filed away with obsessive care. The fourth had been heated and retempered, its brass showing the subtle color shift that comes from precise temperature control. These weren't antiques. They were precision instruments, crafted by someone who understood that the smallest imperfection could prevent a mechanism from achieving its purpose. Plan W? I said, testing the words. Containment through precision, they replied, moving to the first alcove. The architect found something in this foundation, not built, but discovered. Something that required careful handling, like a movement too delicate for rough hands. They inserted the first key into its lock, with the reverence of a surgeon making an incision. He designed this system to channel what couldn't be controlled, to give it form and purpose through mechanical precision. The lock accepted its key with a soft, satisfied click. Tumblers fell into alignment with musical precision, each pin finding its home with the certainty of well-machined tolerances. The alcove's glow shifted from amber to a deeper gold, and somewhere beneath the platform, hydraulic systems responded with increased pressure. The chamber's carved reliefs began to pulse with faint light, following patterns that matched the rhythm of precision clockwork. They moved to the second alcove, their movements economical and practiced. Each key opens more than a lock, Julian. Each represents a stage in the architect's understanding. The second key turned with the same mechanical satisfaction, and now 2 alcoves sang their golden harmonies. He learned to work with what he found rather than against it, to create a system that required not force but finesse. By the 4th key, the chamber had transformed into something that belonged more to a master clockmaker's workshop than a basement. The platform revealed itself as an intricate mechanism, its carved surface lifting to expose precision gears, escapements, and regulating springs that would have made any horologist weep with envy. This wasn't just a hidden room. It was a masterwork of mechanical engineering, designed to harness and direct forces that operated according to laws more complex than simple physics. "The choice is yours, Julian," they said, the seventh key poised above its lock. "Complete the sequence and inherit the architect's true legacy. Walk away and the system seals itself for another generation." They paused, the porcelain mask tilting with something that might have been fondness. "But know this. Some mechanisms, once glimpsed, cannot be forgotten. Some precision work calls to the craftsman's soul." The seventh lock turned with a sound like crystal bells, and the platform began its descent into depths the architect had carved from living stone. As we descended, the walls revealed themselves lined with workbenches that bore the honest scars of decades spent solving mechanical problems. Glass-fronted cabinets displayed collections of timepieces that represented centuries of horological evolution, each one a stepping stone toward understanding time itself as a medium that could be shaped by sufficiently precise hands. At the deepest level, a vault door waited with the patient authority of a master's final examination. 7 keyholes arranged around a central mechanism, each bearing the architect's mark. But it was the workbench beyond that made my breath catch. A timepiece in progress, its movement exposed like a mechanical heart, gears and springs moving in patterns that suggested time might be more flexible than I'd ever imagined. "The architect's true work," they said, their voice carrying new weight in the vault's acoustics. "Not just measuring time, but understanding it, shaping it, using precision to achieve what others thought impossible." They gestured toward the half-completed mechanism. "Your inheritance, if you choose to claim it." The timepiece pulsed with internal light, its exposed escapement marking seconds that seemed to flow in multiple directions simultaneously. Some gears advanced while others retreated, all coordinated in a dance that challenged everything I thought I knew about temporal mechanics. This was clockwork that had moved beyond simple measurement into something approaching art. Or perhaps science, so advanced it resembled magic. From far above came the sound of rain against windows that belonged to a world where time moved in only one direction. Down here, in the architect's hidden workshop, the very air seemed to tick with possibilities I'd never imagined. The 7 keys waited in their locks, and the master timepiece called to every instinct I'd developed through years of coaxing precision from metal and spring. "We'll breathe slow here while the architect's legacy pulses with temporal light. When you're ready, we'll discover whether some doors are meant to be opened by those who understand that true precision can reshape the very fabric of duration itself, if the choice proves as clear as clockwork, if time agrees to be guided by patient, skillful hands." I prepared for the descent the way I prepare for any delicate work that cannot be undone, with ritual precision that steadies both hand and mind. I arranged my tools in their familiar order: brass mallet, cotton gloves, the small notebook where I record observations that matter, and my phone with its dying battery that had become more talisman than instrument. The chamber's stone walls exhaled their mineral breath, while hydraulic systems sang their patient hymns, and I counted my breaths in the rhythm that calms: in for 4, hold for 2, out for 6. The wrongness arrived as a scent I knew too intimately to dismiss. Watch oil, not just any lubricant, but my specific blend. 12 drops of lemon essence to 1 ounce of synthetic base, a formula I'd perfected over years of trial and error. It lifted from the workbench beyond the vault door, where the architect's timepiece waited in its pool of amber light. I hadn't opened that oil. I hadn't been near that bench. Yet the air carried my signature as clearly as a fingerprint pressed in warm wax. I approached the master timepiece with the reverence due to any mechanism that defied understanding. Its movement was larger than any pocket watch, smaller than any clock, a hybrid that existed in its own category of temporal instrument. The case appeared to be carved from meteoric iron, dark and dense, inscribed with equations that mixed familiar horological formulas with mathematics that made my eyes water to follow. But it was the movement itself that stopped my breath. Gears that rotated in patterns that should have been impossible, some clockwise, others counter, all meshing with perfect precision, despite moving at different rates. Under my loupe, details emerged that belonged to no catalog I knew. The mainspring didn't coil in conventional spirals, but pulsed like a mechanical heart, drawing energy from sources I couldn't identify. The balance wheel oscillated at frequencies that seemed to shift and flow, creating harmonics that vibrated through the chamber stone. And at the center, where the dial should have been, an obsidian surface reflected not light, but time itself, showing 217 in figures that pulsed and reformed like living things. On the workbench's leather pad, a notebook waited with the patient authority of evidence. Not the architect's vellum, but the gray-covered dot grid type I bought by the dozen from Murphy's Hardware. I opened it with cotton-gloved fingers and found my own handwriting, the forward lean I'd developed in school. The cross on every F nicked where my pen caught the paper's grain. The entries were dated months into the ITSA future, pages of notes in my hand describing mechanisms I was seeing for the first time tonight. Phase 7 calibration complete, read one entry. Resonance achieved at 217 frequency, subject integration proceeding within parameters. Below that, in those careful block capitals I'd been seeing all night. Observation, window successful, initiate descent protocol. The F in successful carried that familiar notch, but now I recognized it. Not a flaw in someone else's writing, but the scar left by my own damaged pen nib. From the vault door's shadow, the porcelain mask caught the timepiece's pulsing light. "Your hand learns what your mind refuses, Julian," the steward said, their voice carrying new weight in the chamber's acoustics. "We calibrate over years, not hours. What you're experiencing isn't invasion, it's integration." I tested the steadiest truth I had. "I've never been here before tonight." "Incorrect." They moved closer, extending a small object between gloved fingers, a house key with my locksmith's stamp on the bow, and micro scratches that matched my back door's pins exactly. Not a duplicate made from a code. A twin created by the same machine, bearing the wear patterns that only daily use could write. On the bow's face, a sticker in my handwriting. Back, new sile. The adhesive had aged and yellowed, suggesting months of handling. I examined the chamber's limestone floor with a watchmaker's attention to detail. Dust patterns held stories like gear teeth, hold oil. My own footprints tracked from the stairs to the platform, around each alcove, to this workbench. But beside those fresh impressions, older tracks had dried into the mineral dust and worn soft. The same herringbone sole pattern, the same slight outward roll on the right foot from an ankle I'd sprained at 20. My gait, preserved in duplicate, recent and ancient. Transference, I said, the word arriving before I could stop it. Stewardship, they corrected gently. The architect designed this system for someone with specific gifts. Precision of hand, patience with complex mechanisms, the ability to read the language that brass and steel speak when they've been properly loved. Your family carried those gifts. We've been waiting for them to mature. They reached behind the porcelain mask's jaw seam and lifted it free, with the care due to any precision instrument. Beneath, a face I knew, the way you know your own reflection in poor light. Older, thinner, marked by years I hadn't lived yet. The scar by the left brow from a nail at 13. The tiny nick in the right ear where a spring bar had snapped and taught me not to lean too close. Eyes that carried the tired patience of someone who had stopped arguing with calendars. You, I breathed. Steward, he corrected, and it didn't sound like vanity. Caretaker until you arrive. The architect didn't live long enough to teach this work, so we taught ourselves. His voice was mine, worn smooth by years of explaining the same careful procedures to the same stubborn student. The house learns a person, Julian. It watched the architect, then those like him. It became comfortable with a certain kind of carefulness. It prefers it. It can be cruel when denied it. The master timepiece pulsed with increased intensity. It's impossible. Gears, finding new harmonies that made the chamber's stone walls sing. From above, through layers of limestone and steel, I felt, rather than heard, the pocket watch on my kitchen island shiver into a new rhythm. Its single hand pausing, sliding backward, then resuming with the mechanical satisfaction of tumblers falling into alignment. The choice is inheritance, my older voice continued. Complete the architect's work and inherit not just knowledge, but responsibility. Walk away, and the system waits for the next craftsman with the necessary gifts. He paused, studying my face with the attention I gave to balance wheels. But know this, some mechanisms, once glimpsed, cannot be forgotten. Some precision work calls to the craftsman's soul. I opened the notebook again, finding an entry titled Night of Descent on a page dated tomorrow. My handwriting described the choice in present tense. Breathing steady. Tools prepared. The timepiece accepts calibration. At the bottom, a single line in block capitals. The house remembers its purpose. The F notched with familiar precision. From the vault door came a sound like crystal bells. 7 locks turning in sequence, each accepting its key with the mechanical satisfaction of perfect tolerances. The door didn't swing open but dissolved inward, revealing not empty space but a workshop that belonged to a master craftsman's dreams. Workbenches lined the walls, their surfaces bearing the honest scars of decades spent solving mechanical problems. Glass-fronted cabinets displayed timepieces that represented centuries of horological evolution, each one a stepping stone toward understanding time itself as a medium that could be shaped by sufficiently precise hands. At the chamber's center, an altar-like platform held the final component, a regulating assembly that would complete the master timepiece's connection to whatever forces the architect had discovered in this foundation. The component was nearly finished, requiring only the microscopic adjustments that separated competent work from mastery. Your father stood where you stand now, my older self said, producing a photograph that made time fold backward on itself. The image showed a younger version of the porcelain mask beside a man whose hands I recognized. The same long fingers, the same careful way of holding delicate things. He understood the timepiece's potential, but lacked the final precision needed to complete it. The house waited. Time waited. I learned to wait. Systems began choosing sides with polite efficiency. My dead phone lit without warmth, displaying a single notification. Descent protocol active. Calibration window 0217 0217. The router's red light, visible even through stone, changed its pattern to match the master timepiece's pulse. Somewhere in the walls, relays answered with insectal clicks, creating a network of mechanical conversation that spanned decades. The regulating assembly called to every instinct I'd developed through years of coaxing precision from metal and spring. Under the master loop, I could see the final adjustments waiting. A quarter turn of a screw, no larger than a pinhead, calibrated to tensions measured in fractions of grams. The work was so close to completion that the mechanism seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Springs coiled to their designed potential. Jewels aligned with tolerances that challenged the limits of human capability. Once calibrated, my older voice said quietly, the timepiece cannot be stopped or reversed. It becomes part of time's architecture, a permanent modification to how duration flows through this space. The responsibility is eternal. From far above came the sound of rain against windows that belonged to a world where time moved in only one direction. Down here, in the architect's hidden workshop, the very air seemed to tick with possibilities I'd never imagined. The 7 keys waited in their locks. The master timepiece pulsed with temporal light, and the regulating assembly called to hands that had been trained for this moment without knowing it. The choice balanced on the edge of a screwdriver blade, measured in fractions of rotation that would either complete a master's life work or leave it forever suspended at the threshold of possibility. Some doors, once opened, transform the person who opens them. Some precision work changes not just the mechanism, but the craftsman who dares to attempt perfection. We'll breathe slow here, while eternity waits for the turn of a screw. When you're ready, we'll discover whether some choices are made by the hand or by the heart that guides it, and learn what the architect's true legacy demands from those who would inherit the ability to shape time itself through mechanical precision. The regulating assembly waited with the patience of metal that has learned to trust precise hands. I approached it the way I approach any mechanism that demands perfection, with ritual preparation that steadies both breath and intention. I cleaned my loop with the silk cloth I keep for final inspections, tested the torque screwdriver against my thumb to feel its calibrated resistance, and counted the chamber's heartbeat. The master timepiece, pulsing its temporal rhythm through stone that had learned to conduct more than sound. The wrongness crept in through details that belonged to my own careful habits. The workbench's leather pad showed the exact pattern of wear I'd created over years. A circular depression where I rest my wrist, a linear groove worn by the edge of my brass mallet, tiny stains from oils mixed according to my own formula. This wasn't a reproduction. This was my workspace, transported through time or space or some combination that made my craftsman's mind rebel against impossible geometries. Under magnification, the regulating assembly revealed itself as the culmination of horological art. The balance wheel was carved from a single crystal of some material that bent light without breaking it, its rim inscribed with equations that made my eyes water to follow. The hairspring coiled in spirals that seemed to pulse with their own rhythm, each convolution calculated to tolerances that pushed the boundaries of what human hands could achieve. At the center, where the staff should have been, an opening waited, perfectly circular, precisely machined to accept a component I couldn't see but somehow knew. The architect's final gift, my older self said, producing a small velvet case from the workbench drawer. Inside, nestled in silk that had yellowed with decades, lay a staff, no thicker than a needle but gleaming with the inner light of worked meteoric iron. Forged from the same material as the case, calibrated to frequencies that exist between seconds. Once installed, the timepiece becomes more than instrument. It becomes lens. I lifted the staff with cotton-tipped forceps, feeling its weight distribute through my fingers with the perfect balance that separates competent work from artistry. Under the loop, microscopic engravings spiraled along its length. Not decorative, but functional. Mathematical formulas that described the relationship between mechanical precision and temporal flow. Equations that suggested time itself might be as malleable as properly heated brass. From the chamber's walls, a voice emerged, not from speakers, but conducted through stone and metal like words spoken by the architecture itself. Julian, my name pronounced with the careful precision of someone who had practiced saying it across decades. The observation phase is complete. Integration proceeds within acceptable parameters. Welcome to the architect's true foundation. The voice belonged to neither my older self nor the steward who had guided me here, but to something older, more patient. The chamber's carved reliefs began to pulse with synchronized light, following patterns that matched the master timepiece's rhythm. In that pulsing illumination, I glimpsed the truth the architect had discovered in this foundation. Not empty space to be filled, but a natural resonance point where time's fabric grew thin enough to be influenced by sufficiently precise mechanical intervention. Containment through precision, I said, the words arriving before I could think them. Collaboration, the architectural voice corrected gently. The architect found something here that required not control but partnership. Time is not a river to be dammed, Julian. It's a medium to be shaped by those who understand its true nature. I positioned the staff above its opening, feeling the magnetic pull that drew it toward perfect alignment. The crystal balance wheel began to sing as the meteoric iron approached. Harmonics that made the chamber's stone walls vibrate in sympathy. This wasn't just mechanical assembly, it was the completion of a circuit that had been waiting 70 years for the right hands to close it. Once installed, my older self warned, the timepiece cannot be stopped or reversed. It becomes part of time's architecture, a permanent modification to how duration flows through this space. The responsibility is eternal. I paused, the staff trembling between forceps that had guided 1,000 delicate operations. In that moment of hesitation, the chamber showed me what the architect had truly built. The walls dissolved into transparency, revealing the hidden network that connected this foundation to others. A web of precision instruments scattered across decades, each one a node in a system designed to stabilize time's flow through careful mechanical intervention. Through that temporal transparency, I saw the truth of my inheritance. Not just this single timepiece, but a network of craftsmen like myself, each one maintaining their portion of the architect's greater design. In workshops hidden beneath other houses, other hands performed the same careful calibrations, adjusting mechanisms that kept time's fabric from tearing under the weight of too much precision applied without wisdom. The Architects Guild, I breathed. Stewards of duration, my older self confirmed. Each one chosen for gifts that cannot be taught. Precision of hand, patience with complex mechanisms, the ability to read the language that time speaks when it's been properly loved. He gestured toward the staff waiting in my forceps. Your father understood the responsibility but lacked the final precision needed to complete it. I learned to wait. Time learned to wait. The house learned to wait. From above, through layers of limestone and steel, came the sound of systems engaging in sequence. My security panel chimed as circuits I'd never installed drew power from sources I couldn't identify. The router's LED changed pattern. 7 quick pulses, pause, repeat. Throughout the house, mechanical systems began their own careful choreography. Locks turning, chains settling, relays clicking in patterns that spoke of coordination rather than malfunction. The master timepiece pulsed with increasing intensity, its impossible gears finding new harmonies that made the chamber sing. The obsidian dial showed not 2:17 but a cascade of times. Past moments when the architect had stood in this same position. Future moments when other hands would perform the same careful work. All flowing together in a temporal symphony that challenged everything I thought I knew about causality. I aligned the staff with its opening and felt the universe hold its breath. The meteoric iron slipped into position with the satisfaction of perfect tolerances, clicking home with a sound like crystal bells. The balance wheel began to rotate, slowly at first, then with increasing speed as the mechanism found its designed rhythm. Light pulsed from the crystal rim, casting shadows that moved independently of their sources. The chamber transformed around us as the timepiece achieved full resonance. The carved reliefs became windows into other moments. The architect's hands performing the same installation. My father attempting the same precision. Countless future craftsmen maintaining the delicate balance between mechanical perfection and temporal stability. All of us connected by the same careful attention to detail that separated competent work from mastery. Integration complete, the architectural voice announced with satisfaction. Temporal stabilization achieved. Network synchronization proceeding within acceptable parameters. From the workbench drawer, my older self produced a final gift. A pocket watch identical to the one I'd seen on my kitchen island. But this one bore my initials engraved in the architect's careful script. Your commission, he said simply. Time measurement calibrated to the network's frequency. It will guide you when the work requires precision beyond human capability. The watch's face showed not hours and minutes, but the pulse of the network itself. Dozens of timepieces scattered across the continent, each one maintaining its portion of the architect's design. As I watched, new nodes appeared and disappeared, craftsmen completing their installations or passing their responsibilities to the next generation of hands, precise enough to shape time itself. The house remembers its purpose now, my older self said, already beginning to fade as the temporal circuit completed itself. The work continues. The precision endures. Welcome to the architect's true legacy, Julian. The chamber settled into its new rhythm as I became its steward, inheritor of knowledge that transformed mechanical skill into something approaching art. From far above came the sound of rain against windows. But down here, in the architect's hidden workshop, time moved according to rules written by hands that understood the difference between measuring duration and shaping it. The master timepiece ticked with the heartbeat of eternity, and I finally understood what the architect had discovered in this foundation. Not just a place where time grew thin, but a responsibility that would define every careful adjustment I made for the rest of my precisely measured days. We'll breathe slow here while the network finds its new equilibrium. When you're ready, we'll discover what it means to be a steward of time itself and learn whether some precision work transforms not just the mechanism, but the very nature of the craftsman who dares to attempt perfection. The master timepiece settled into its eternal rhythm, and I understood that the craftsman who had descended these limestone steps no longer existed. In his place stood something new, a steward of duration, connected to a network that pulsed through my awareness like a second heartbeat. The chamber around me had become transparent to time's flow, revealing the vast architecture I had inherited. Dozens of temporal stabilizers scattered across continents, each one maintained by hands that had learned to shape duration itself through mechanical precision. The pocket watch my older self had given me warmed against my palm, its obsidian face displaying the synchronized pulse of nodes across the globe. A light winked steady in Prague, where careful hands adjusted mechanisms that kept Central European time stable. Another pulsed urgent red from beneath the Swiss Alps, a steward requiring assistance with a delicate calibration. In Kyoto, an elderly craftsman performed his final adjustments before passing responsibility to younger hands. We were all connected by the same patient attention to detail that separated competent work from mastery. I climbed the limestone steps carrying more than tools and knowledge. I carried the weight of revelation that pressed against my shoulders like a craftsman's apron made of temporal responsibility. The basement greeted me with its familiar electrical hum, but now I heard the subsonic thrumming of deeper mechanisms that fed power to the architect's true foundation. New breakers in my panel drew steady loads, each labeled in handwriting I was still learning to recognize as my own. Temporal buffer, resonance control, network interface. The kitchen waited with that considerate 60% lighting, and I began to understand the night's true architecture. On the counter where I'd left nothing, a leather tool roll lay open. My roll, cinched with the knot my hands had learned years ago. Inside, lock picks polished where my thumb always rested. A tension wrench bearing my small file mark. The thermal imager I'd seen held toward my own cameras, and nested deeper, wrapped in lint-free cloth. The porcelain mask that had haunted my reflections all night. When I lifted it, the strap shortened to fit my head without adjustment. The inside smelled faintly of lemon and graphite. My lemon, my graphite. Under the work light, I examined the wooden bird I'd found on the guest room nightstand. My loupe revealed what I'd refused to see before. Between the carved eyes, a partial fingerprint that belonged to me. The left index, complete with a pad scar where a spring bar had snapped years ago. My fear had been curated by my own careful hands. Against the toaster, a maintenance jacket hung where nothing should have been. Dark blue, shoreline systems, embroidered in white thread. The laminated ID in its pocket bore my photograph, at an age I hadn't yet lived, printed with credentials that could get you past most security desks. The lamination showed a bubble at the lower left corner, the same flaw my old machine made when it ran too hot. Insider access, issued by a future version of myself who had learned the paths maintenance workers walk unnoticed. From the pantry cavity, I retrieved the surveillance equipment that had documented my own careful work. The monitor showed 4 feeds, all time-stamped 217. In the upper left, a kitchen that wasn't mine. Different tile, different window. A plant on the sill with leaves like small hands. My next assignment. In the lower right, my own attic bench sat empty, waiting for the craftsman who would inherit it after I moved on to whatever came after stewardship. The revelation unfolded with the mechanical precision of tumblers falling into alignment. I was not the victim of this elaborate surveillance. I was its architect, its patient conductor. The observation window that had opened tonight was one I had designed, calibrated, and executed with the same careful attention I brought to every delicate mechanism. The house hadn't been invaded. It had been prepared. I hadn't been watched. I had been observed, measured, and guided toward a role I was born to fulfill. Yet beneath this understanding, something ancient stirred in the foundation's bones. From deep within the architect's original discovery came a low, subsonic growl. Not the house settling, but something vast and patient that required constant containment through mechanical precision. The network wasn't just about maintaining time's flow. It was about keeping something at bay, something that waited in the spaces between seconds for the slightest deviation, the smallest imperfection in our collective work. I donned the maintenance jacket and felt it settle around my shoulders like familiar armor. The porcelain mask transformed my reflection into something both beautiful and terrible. Rosy cheeks that caught the light, painted lips curved in patient smile, dark eye holes that revealed nothing while seeing everything. In the jacket's breast pocket, a small notebook contained addresses written in my careful script, each one marking a house where precision hands worked late into the night, unaware they were being prepared for inheritance. The first address led to a familiar curve in a neighborhood I'd never driven, the kind of architectural repetition that suggested the same mind had planned multiple installations. My phone displayed the route with green lights timed to my approach, traffic patterns adjusted by systems that anticipated my needs. The network took care of its own. I gathered the 7 antique keys from their black felt, each one warm from recent handling. These weren't just tools for opening locks. They were components in a larger mechanism, pieces of a puzzle that connected each new steward to the architect's eternal design. In my kit, lockpicks worn bright where fingers had lived, a rake and hook and diamond, tension wrenches calibrated to pressures measured in fractions of grams. The garage door rolled up with mechanical courtesy as I approached. The street held its breath in the pre-dawn stillness, rain-washed and patient. As I backed into the empty road, the network provided green lights in sequence, each intersection clearing with the precision of a well-tuned escapement. In the rear-view mirror, my house settled into darkness, its work complete. For now, the route bent through geometry the architect had loved, repeating curves that returned you to yourself from slightly different angles. At each turn, my pocket watch ticked backward 1 notch, counting down to the moment when another craftsman would hear the first metallic drip and begin their own journey toward understanding. The radio whispered static that almost formed words, memories of rain from other nights, playing on loops that connected past to future. I parked 2 houses down from my destination, under a street lamp that flickered twice in acknowledgement before settling into steady illumination. The house waited in the storm's aftermath, its windows dark except for a single square of light in what would be the attic workshop. Inside, steady hands worked late into the night, absorbed in the delicate restoration of mechanical time, unaware that observation had already begun. Distance games have rules learned through patient practice. I crossed the lawn without stepping on seams, approached the back door where a deadbolt sat vertical and a chain lock bore fresh scratches. Same curve, like a lesson already started. The 7 antique keys arranged themselves in a perfect semicircle on the rain-damp step, their brass catching faint sodium glow from the lamp above. I pressed the porcelain face gently against the kitchen window. Not threat, but demonstration. Proof that the house was now part of a network older than fear, kinder than panic. The glass fogged from my breath inside the mask. I drew a smile with a gloved fingertip. Wrong at first, then corrected to the right curve. Muscle memory learning new precision. From within came the sound I'd been waiting for, a soft foot-rolling weight across a complaining floorboard. Every house has one. A voice whispered a name I didn't know yet, with the same careful pronunciation I'd heard all night. The observation window opened with the quiet authority of well-oiled hinges, systems engaged with polite inevitability. Somewhere in the walls, a relay clicked. The pocket watch in my coat pulsed backward 1 notch and considered its options. Through the frosted glass, I watched a figure move with the unconscious precision of someone absorbed in delicate work, unaware that their careful habits were being cataloged, their routines mapped, their readiness measured against standards established by the architect decades ago. The chain lifted 1 link and settled, a language learned in scratches, spoken in the vocabulary of controlled access. The deadbolt accepted my pick with the contented sigh of pins, finding their designated places. Through the mask, the world narrowed to brass and graphite, and the soft hiss of manufactured rain, to the quiet gratitude of a lock that had been waiting to move for a very long time. From deep beneath this new foundation, I felt the presence stir, ancient, patient, contained by the collective precision of hands like mine scattered across continents and decades. The work was eternal, the vigilance constant, the responsibility absolute. Some doors, once opened, transform the person who opens them. Some precision work changes not just the mechanism, but the craftsman who dares to attempt perfection. We'll breathe slow here, under the patient lamp and the afterbreath of storm. The network pulses with mechanical satisfaction as another node prepares for activation. When you're ready, we'll finish the arc of this curve and see what waits on the other side of the glass, where steady hands work late into the night, and time itself waits to be shaped by the careful attention that only true craftsmen can provide.